Raider Nation, what's going on? You're watching the Raiders Report, and today's show is presented by Manscaped. The NFL Draft is right around the corner, and from what I'm told, the top prospect is a prospect who's got all of his downstairs stuff covered. Go to manscaped.com, use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping. So what's going to be coming up here on today's show? I did my best to rank the quarterbacks that I believe Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler are most likely to select during the 2023 NFL Draft. I have stepped up onto the show before, and I said there is a for just win, babies, 100% chance that the Las Vegas Raiders draft a QB this year. So the question is, who is it going to be? Before I give you my list where I go from 10 and I work my way all the way down to 1, which quarterback are the Raiders most likely to draft this year? I'm going to be looking down in the comments. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say because I think most of y'all are going to go with the big name QBs. But I'm going to tell you right now, my number 1, not a big name quarterback. Let's go to number 10 here on my list, Logan Bonner. You guys can already guess what Jeremy said, presented by Manscaped. From Utah State, the Raiders were at his pro day, and a lot of the quarterbacks that you're going to see pop up here have some sort of connection with McDaniels, with Ziegler, because if there was anything I have learned from free agency, hell, the draft in years past, coaching hires, if McDaniels and Ziegler know you or have some sort of connection with you, there's a good chance you could be on this team. So the fact that the Raiders were at his pro day, that makes him number 10 on this list. I'll be 100% honest with you. I don't know if Bonner is going to get drafted. He might get stiffed. So to me, he could be an option for a UDFA. He's from Texas. This past season, he got injured. But the year that I really think he was most impressive was in 2021, where he had 36 touchdowns. He had 12 interceptions. This past season, though, only 56.4% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. The good tape, 2021. The not-so-great tape, 2022. He's got a decent arm, late round guy, but he is a UDFA to at least keep in mind. Let's go to number 9 here on the list. I'm going to go with Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. And when I looked at this list, this is not a list on how talented the quarterback is. This is not a list on where I think they could have him on the big board. It simply comes down to most likely to be drafted. The Raiders had a local visit with him. So for those that don't know, he's in the Vegas area. They also held a top 30 visit with Thompson-Robinson. The other reason why he's going to make my list here is because the Raiders, they have 7 picks from round 5 to round 7. So simple odds. Like if you like betting, you like odds makers out there, you got 7 picks where I believe he ends up going round 5 to round 7. That makes him a lot higher of a candidate for the Raiders to take him. Now, one of the other reasons why I like Thompson-Robinson in the past is because he's got versatility. He is a really athletic quarterback. He's got plenty playing experience. On top of that, I would say has a decent arm. However, his decision-making is bad. He was a very bad decision maker at UCLA. Maybe you think you can correct that. Maybe you think you can find somebody that can fit into your scheme. I will say, though, I don't have a lot of confidence in Thompson-Robinson fitting McDaniels' scheme, which is why he's number 9. For those that do not know, Jermaine Illuminor is going to be joining the Raiders Report Friday, April 21st. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you got those notifications turned on. And if you're looking for more Raiders videos around the draft, around trades, free content, that's what the show is all about. In terms of some loyal watchers, people who are always a part of the Noti Gang, if you know, you know. If you're a real one, spam RO4L right now down in the comments. I know Venom Sosa, always chilling. Juan Hernandez, can always count on him. Anthony Sandoval, I'm Punchy33. And, of course, I got to give a shout-out to John Butson, a.k.a. Al Davis. Appreciate all of y'all always watching the show. Let's go to number 8 here on the list. And for some of y'all are going to be like, Bryce Young, number 8. Mitch, you're way too low. It's not a matter of the Raiders not liking Bryce Young. In fact, I don't think they like Bryce Young. They love Bryce Young. He is no doubt one of their quarterback. If they were to release their draft board, Young is either QB1 or QB2. Hell, I can even make an argument there is a QB 1A and 1B. My reasoning, though, for why he is number 8 on my list, because I am a big-time believer that the Panthers are expected to draft him at number 1. I did a show on Friday saying that the Carolina Panthers love Bryce Young. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick. If you don't believe me, it was on Friday last week. Then reports start popping out left and right where now he's the favorite to go number 1 overall. I will say, though, if he does somehow not go number 1 and he falls to 2 or 3, that's where these rankings I would totally switch. If Bryce Young is not the number 1 overall pick and he's on the board at 2, and if he's on the board at 3, I would put him in my top 3. He's number 8, though, because I'm that confident he's going number 1 overall. Let's go to number 7 here on my list in terms of which quarterback is most likely to be drafted by the Raiders. I'm going to go with Tanner McKee out of Stanford. When you talk about McDaniels, you're always going to bring up he wants a smart quarterback to run his offense. Just like Ryan Fitzpatrick got mentioned, he went to Harvard, people will continue to talk about Tanner McKee going to Stanford. The Raiders met with him at the Combine. That's plus number 1. Plus number 2, Las Vegas has 8 day 3 picks. I don't see McKee going in day 2. In terms of where I have him graded out, I have him graded out as a 5th-round quarterback, which might be a little bit lower than some other people. I just see Davis Mills, and I'm not saying that from the simple fact of they both went to Stanford, but they are both big-arm quarterbacks, tall, lanky. If you want Mike Glennon, go ahead. Go get yourself Tanner McKee. He's going to be a really good backup quarterback in the NFL, I would say for 6, 7, 8 years, because he's going to be able to pick up NFL playbooks. He kind of, from a talent standpoint, also reminds me of a little bit of like a Dan Orlovsky, if you will. I'm not crazy about the prospect, but I could see the Raiders liking him because of the Stanford connections, because of his ability to pick up an offense, and because he's got a strong arm. But he is number 7 on my list. Before I show you my top 6, remember, today's show is presented by Manscaped. And if anybody hasn't already gotten started with Manscaped, please make sure you do. Whether you're using the Lawnmower 4.0 to make sure that your downstairs is looking great, here's my best analogy that I can give of why you should try Manscaped. How many people out there, just when the Raiders get in the red zone and McDaniels pulls out some wild shit and you're like, why the hell is he doing that right now? Imagine you and your girl, you get to the red zone and you know that you're about to score. And then she looks and she just sees nothing but George W. I don't want that to happen to you. I want the nation to score. And if you use Manscaped products, I got a feeling that your red zone percentage is going to be a little bit higher. So go to manscaped.com with code Raiders, 20% off and free shipping. We got a 1-2 punch here with men's grooming, the best acquisition for any home GM. Seriously, whether you want the Lawnmower 4.0, whether you want the trimmer, the beard hedger, we got it all. The performance package, the premium package. We got ball deodorant. We got the crop preserver, which the crop preserver is elite, Chugs, because if you think about it, if you get down there and it just smells like Famunda cheese, it's not a great thing. You want it to smell good. Also, the Weed Whacker. Get rid of those nose hairs. The most comfortable boxers you will ever wear. All I'm trying to say is this. Promo code Raiders, manscaped.com. Link's going to be available for you guys in the comments and in the description of today's show. I shout out to Manscaped for helping me get into the red zone and score as much as humanly possible. Let's go to the next name here on my list. It's Jake Haener from Fresno State coming in at number 6. I know the Raiders like Haener's ability to be able to dissect the defense quickly. The Raiders met with him at the NFL Scouting Combine. The other thing that I was told by a very good source is much like the Carolina Panthers looking at S2 cognitive testing, the Raiders are also a team. This is more of a McDaniels thing than a Dave Ziegler. They're looking at S2 cognitive testing. If you don't know what it is, it's essentially a test to be able to show coaches, GMs, whoever, how well a quarterback, a player is going to be able to make good decisions in the NFL. It's probably the easiest way I can dumb that down. Haener scored in the 97th percentile. When you look at a lot of the quarterbacks that have scored that high, they have done well. And the person that Haener has been compared to is Brock Purdy. If you give Haener that comparison, he actually doesn't like it all that much. But also, they remind me a lot of each other because the size, very similar. They don't have a lot of talent. But if you're able to find a quarterback that can make the right decisions, that's going to go a long way. He's also from Danville, California. I'm from Danville, PA. Shout out to Jake Haener from Fresno, number 6 on my list. Let's get it now to number 5. I got Will Levis from Kentucky. I am a believer that Will Levis is going to go in round 1. And to be frank with you, grading out and ranking Tanner McKee, Jake Haener, Will Levis, and the guy at number 4 was very difficult for me because it's an odds thing. But I'm going to go based off of the Raiders having the opportunity to take Will Levis early on because he's going to be there at number 7 in my gut. The Raiders met with him at the Combine, and they had a top 30 visit. So not only did they meet him at the Combine and top 30 visit, like that's 2 big things for this Raiders regime. If Las Vegas does end up trading back, and depending on how far they trade back, I could see them taking Will Levis in that regard. I can also see Levis start sliding down the board, and I know the Raiders like the fact that he ran a pro-style offense at Kentucky. However, there are reports out there that he is QB4 or QB5. I would confidently say that I believe he's QB5 on McDaniels and Ziegler's board, which I don't 100% agree with, but it's their board after all. I was told by a really reliable source that the Raiders are actually worried that he's too muscular, that they want a quarterback who's got a little bit more flexibility, and they would want him to slim up a little bit for longevity in the NFL. He's got all the talent in the world. He's got all the athletic ability. He's got the arm talent, no doubt about it. But he does come in at number 5 here on my list. Speaking of talent, number 4 is Anthony Richardson. If you had a head coach like a Brian Dable, a coach that I was confident in that could develop a quarterback and turn him into a legit Pro Bowl or a top 5 QB, I'd say let's do it. That's not Josh McDaniels. I'm sorry, until I see it otherwise, I don't see it. This is the intriguing part, and the reason why Richardson is ranked higher than Levis and ranked higher than some other people. He is the only quarterback Las Vegas has met with at the Combine that they went to the pro day and had a top 30 visit. There is not another quarterback in the 2023 NFL draft that can say that. So there is definitely some interest there. I'll also admit that it's probably more of homework because when you watch the tape with Richardson, you probably don't fall in love with it. But the athletic ability is like, if I'm going to be competing with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, who's a quarterback that can potentially be a top 5 QB? It's Richardson. He also probably has the highest bust rate out of any QB that could potentially go in round 1. There are reports out there that he's not a top 3 QB on the Raiders list. Cool. But the athletic ability is going to make you fall in love. And McDaniels fell in love with a Florida quarterback before. Some people call him Tim Tebow. Number 15 as well. Will they go back to that? I don't know. I don't think that the Raiders take him at 7. But if they do trade back and he's there on the board, I think they could potentially think about it. Anthony Richardson is at number 4. So we got a top 3 to get into, and I do think the top 3 is where it's at. Like, to me, there is a clear tier break at the top 3 quarterbacks. So the first question I ask you is, who is the most likely to be drafted? This question is different. What quarterback do you, sitting at home, 209, Roger, Ryan Johnson, Exotic Raiders, which quarterback do you want the Raiders to draft the most? Because if they do end up taking a QB, the quarterback that I would like for them to take, if he's available, at number 7, would be C.J. Stroud. I like Stroud. He is my number 1 quarterback for the Raiders. Not overall, but for the Raiders. I know for a fact that Dave Ziegler has been a big fan of Stroud and loves this kid a lot. If he does slide down the board and he's there at 5, I think the Raiders trade up to go out and get him. I have said on the show for probably close to now 2-3 months that Ziegler, this is his dude. If there is any chance whatsoever that he slides, the Raiders are going to be interested. That doesn't mean that the trade's going to end up going down, but phone calls will be made. They like the fact that he's got legit arm talent. They love the fact that he has had success in college, that he played well against Georgia. The thing that scares the Raiders and like all NFL teams out there is when the pocket breaks down, he struggles. The pocket's going to break down a lot more in the NFL than what it did at Ohio State. But from an overall talent standpoint, in terms of being the most, like what teams look for in a prototypical starting quarterback, it's C.J. Stroud in this year's class. I do think Bryce Young is a better decision maker. He's 5'10", 200 pounds, though. Where Stroud's 6'3", 220 pounds, and has all the intangibles that you're looking for. And if you're an NFL team that thinks that, hey, I can make this work, Stroud's the guy this season. Because Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, a lot more risk than C.J. Stroud. Let's go to number 2, though, on my list here of quarterbacks most likely to be drafted by the Raiders. I got Hendon Hooker at number 2. The Hooker hype has really been ramping up over the past week because there's been reports circulating out there that he's the QB3 on the Raiders draft board. The Raiders had him in for a top 30 visit. I did a show 2 months ago, a source told me that the most likely quarterback drafted by the Raiders is Hendon Hooker. And he told me that shortly after Tom Brady announced his retirement. Shortly after Tom Brady announced his retirement, I do wonder if the Raiders' plan was like, all right, we're going to go out and get Jimmy Garoppolo. And we know that Hooker's not going to be able to play in year 1 because of that ACL injury. So the contract that Jimmy Garoppolo was given is actually very on point with the timeline of Hooker being ready to rock and roll for his, I guess, first official season with the Raiders, which would be in 2024. The Raiders love his decision-making. The Raiders love his ability to lead, his work ethic, and the ties to Tennessee go way back. So the ties to Tennessee, Mark Davis loves Tennessee. It's also one of the reasons why he hired John Gruden, because John Gruden was a Tennessee guy. I've been trying to pinpoint exactly where all the Tennessee ties go, but from what I understand, Mark Davis likes Hendon Hooker a lot. Wants a quarterback that he believes can run and execute an offense effectively with Josh McDaniels. So Hendon Hooker is definitely a name to keep in mind. The problem is, if you want him, you're probably going to have to take him in round 1 or round 2. And for that reason, I could not put him at number 1. Because for the simple fact of odds and odds alone, the reason why I believe the number 1 quarterback most likely to be drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders is Aidan O'Connell. And that might be a letdown for a lot of Raider fans out there. But to be honest, I would look at it as a positive spin. Because if you draft Aidan O'Connell, that doesn't necessarily mean that in the 2024 draft, where I think a lot of us want the Raiders to go if you want to take a QB, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to take a QB. If you take Aidan O'Connell this year, great. That could be your backup. That could be your Jarrett Stidham replacement, essentially. So the Raiders went to his pro day, and they had him in for a top 30 visit. In fact, O'Connell, I believe, was the very first quarterback that they ever even scouted and went to. And he is number 1 based on odds and odds alone. And why do I say that? The Raiders have 8 day 3 picks. You got a round 4 pick, 3 fifths, 2 6s, 2 7s. And I believe that's where Aidan O'Connell ends up going. And the Raiders are a lot higher on him than most NFL teams. So the fact that they have all these picks, the fact that they have been scouting him for a while, they like Hendon Hooker more. They like C.J. Stroud more. They like a lot of quarterbacks more than O'Connell. But the way that the Raiders, I believe, could construct this draft is if they don't end up getting a QB on day 1, on day 2, I think they could have O'Connell circled where they have 8 picks then on day 3, and they can get creative, and they can go out and get this guy. He's very intelligent. He's a team leader. He's got great work ethic. The only word I didn't say there is versatility. I know the Raiders like O'Connell a lot, and that's why he's number 1 from a simple odds perspective. So, which quarterback will the Las Vegas Raiders draft? Here is my top 10. If you want to take a screenshot of this right now, please do so. Post it on Twitter. Post it on Instagram. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. If the Raiders want to take a QB in round 1, I want it to be C.J. Stroud. If they're like, no, we're coming out with a quarterback in the top 2 rounds, well then, I actually don't mind the idea of Hendon Hooker at 38. I would still probably rather have C.J. at 7 than Hooker at 38, but overall, I don't mind the idea of Aidan O'Connell in round 5, in round 6, because that means, fingers crossed, that the Raiders built their defense early on in the draft, and then you got a QB a little bit later on that can learn with McDaniels, and if it ends up being something, we've seen quarterbacks turn out time and time again. If you put them in a good system, you build a team around them, you can be successful. So appreciate everyone that tuned in to today's show. Shout out to Jeremy Chuggs making a lot of crazy faces back there. Remember, we're going to be live for the entire NFL draft. Every single pick. We're going to get the picks before you see them on TV. Make sure you subscribe to find out which quarterback the Raiders actually draft.